Hello, Veteran Outdoorsman here, and today we are going to talk about my favorite way to fish for bass, um, and I also catch a few other things, but my favorite way to bass fish, and about the tackle used, and that is with a Texas rigged soft plastic. I've alluded to that in my other videos. I flat out said it in some of my other videos. And here we go. Very simple. Texas rigged soft plastic worm. This is a 4-inch finesse worm by Zoom. I use a lot of Zoom products. No, I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. They make a good product at a very reasonable price, and I use probably 75% of my soft plastics are made by them, if not more. Um, Nice, supple, uh, fairly rugged. Not unusual to catch 10 or 12 fish off of one of these. Rarely do I catch less than 5 before I have to retie. And your mileage may vary a little bit on that, but let's get in the way I rig it because I do use different types of soft plastics. I've done another video, so we won't spend a whole lot of time. Tie whatever your favorite knot is with an extra wide gap hook. But first, slide your slip sinker on. I like to use water gremlin and bullet weight both. I use lead sinkers. I'm cheap, and tungsten to me just doesn't seem worth the added cost. But if that's what you use, that's fine. Typically use an eighth or 3/16. Sometimes I'll go a little heavier, but for most of my fishing, an eighth or 3/16, maybe up to a quarter if I really need a heavier weight. But an eighth to 3/16, 99% of the time, that's what I use. A glass or plastic bead. Prefer a red bead. A clear will work, but I prefer a red bead. It tends to give me just a few more strikes. That color really grabs the fish's attention, and it makes just a little. Not sure if you can hear it, but it makes just a little bit of noise. The glass makes more noise. I prefer the glass. Plastic will work. Slide a small swivel upon the line. Tie on my hook. Then I run the hook through the nose, run the other end of the swivel through the hook. Then I finish hooking it up. I expose it. Boom. Nice, straight, great presentation. I do this whether it be with a small finesse worm, a trick worm, a U-tail or ribbon-tailed worm, a brush hog, a baby brush hog, a crawpappy, a lizard, whatever the case may be. Most of the time, I'm going to have an extra wide gap hook of appropriate size, and to expose it just like this. The rod, we've talked about this in other videos. It's a 7-foot medium heavy fast action. This particular rod, and I really, really like it, is a Bass Pro Shop Tourney Special. Medium heavy, fast action. See if you can get that here. 7-foot. This particular rod is a 2-piece. I do a fair amount of traveling when I fish. I like to fish on vacation, and this fits better in my wife's car. In my pickup truck, it's not a big deal. I can put it kitty corner in the bed if it's just fine. I can put it in my canoe or my kayak, whatever. But when traveling, even in a station wagon, the ability to reduce this to 2 short pieces is very nice. I could also put it, in a duffel bag, something like that for air travel things. So it really, really is beneficial to me. And these rods are not the same as they were, years ago where a two-piece really loses its sensitivity. The bend of the rod isn't affected very much. The rod is still very sensitive. Fact is, I remember my dad had a all-star rod that he loved to worm fish with years ago. Very good rod. Um, Now he bought it probably 30 years ago. This rod though is every bit as sensitive as that, and we thought that was the most sensitive rod there was back then. You can dangle a piece of line off the end of it, and someone tap it, and you can feel it in the butt of the rod. Very sensitive. Maybe not as sensitive as a one piece, but more than sensitive enough. It's blank through construction. You can feel the blank right here. I don't have that on my crankbait spinnerbait rods, but on my worm and jig rods, I do have that, and I feel that's a must for worms and jigs. Not necessarily for crankbaits and spinnerbaits, but if you have that, it's a plus. Let's talk a little bit about the reel. This is an Abu Garcia Black Max. Just a run-of-the-mill, inexpensive reel. It's got 5 bearings. I believe it's a 6.3, 6.4 to 1, 6.4 to 1, 6.4 to 1. An inexpensive reel. Many would prefer to go with, would say the Pro Max or a Revo. I certainly would not argue with either one of those. I like the gear ratio of this one. It's held up very well. I've had this reel for a few years now. Held up very well. Fact is, I have several of these on different reels. And I also have a Max Winch, which is basically the same reel with a bigger spool and a slower gear ratio. And I really like them. Again, I'm cheap. They're inexpensive, but they really do the job. It's not like back in the days when you get a cheaper reel now. It's not, used to you get the old Quantum Light, somewhere along those lines. And they did their job. And they weren't bad reels really for the day, like a 5.3 to 1, had a flipping switch. But you could really tell the difference. Honestly, you can tell the difference between this and a Pro Max or this and a Revo. But if this is all you ever fished with, it's so smooth. The anti-reverse is very good. The drag works very well. That coming from where I was used to the old round ambassador reels. The old style, not the brand new ones, the old ones without the infinite anti-reverse, etc. The older Daiwa and Quantum reels with 5.3 to 1 or slower, without anti-reverse. Not all of them had the magnets, etc. Going from them to finally picking up bass fishing again and picking up a few inexpensive Black Max reels. These are better than the best reels of 25, 30 years ago when I started bass fishing. Certainly better than what I could afford 20 years ago when I started buying my own gear. They did make better reels even than this back then, but they were very expensive. Let's go a little bit into how I fish this. You see me playing around with it, kind of pitching here. So you've made your cast, and there's 2 ways to work this one. One is hops. Get up to a certain height, reel down, hop, get to about here, reel down, hop. Now my preferred method, and I'm going to have trouble demonstrating it here because of space and room, but my preferred method is cast out, slowly drag sideways, reel in the slack. Cast out, slowly drag sideways, reel in the slack. And I want to feel every rock and every bump that it comes across. Do I get hung up occasionally? Sure. Do I have to go over and go opposite of the direction I was pulling and clear it? Sure. I do tend to use light wire hooks because when they get hung on rocks and things, I can usually straighten them out enough to get it free. Then I take my pliers, straighten them back up, touch them up, sharpen them again. I'm ready to go, or tie on a new hook, whichever I need. But I really prefer the slow drag, and there's a reason for that. I feel that at least when I hop, unless the fish are really, really biting good, I tend to overfish it. I tend to fish it way too fast and cover too much water way too fast. When I slow down, whether it be a worm, a baby brush hog, a crawl, etc., and I drag it along the bottom, I just really tend to get more bites. Now, when the fish are hammering hot and I'm catching fish left and right, I throw it in there and I do the standard hop. Now, I don't bring it up 2-3 feet and let it fall. I just hop it along the surface just enough that I feel that weight's coming off the ground, and I just kind of, see if I can show you, just kind of bounce it along like this. Maybe get it up a foot or so, let it fall, and keep it close to the bottom. Many like to bring it up 2-3 feet and let it fall down. 2-3 feet, let it fall down. 2-3 feet, let it fall down. That can be very effective, especially on active fish. That's just not my preferred method. I tend to get more strikes fishing as close to the bottom, and I really like to just drag it slow along the bottom. I also like to bounce it off a structure. If I'm pitching this rod around a boat dock or something like that, I like to get it right at the water line to hit that boat piling and slide down. As it follows structure and slides down the structure, I tend to get more strikes than if I was a foot or even 6 inches away from it, because the fish hold onto the structure. And the closer you are to that structure, the more likely you are to get a strike. I'm certainly not the world's foremost person on bass fishing, but that's what works for me. Again, a really sensitive rod. This Bass Pro Tourney Special I just absolutely love. I wouldn't mind having 2 or 3 more. I can use them to throw heavy spinnerbaits. I can use them to throw jigs. With the right line, I could flip and pitch with it. It has a fairly soft tip. But for me, it's just perfect for worm fishing. It's very, very, very sensitive and works very well. A little bit about my rig again. I've got this one spooled with 12-pound monofilament. Pick the one you're confident in, the one you're comfortable with. If you prefer fluorocarbon, if you prefer braid, that's fine. Again, I fish on the cheap. I've got a budget. Monofilament works just fine for me. 12-pound for worm fishing. I don't tend to go more than 14 for just general bass fishing. I don't tend to go less than 10 unless I'm finesse fishing. And then on my spinning rod, I will have 8, 6, possibly even 4. It's got nice stainless or titanium guides. I'm not sure. But really nice, smooth, snag-free guides. And a lot of them. It's just a really nice rod for the price. I spent less than $60 on this rod and less than $60 on the reel. I mean, for $120, you get a really nice setup. And it rivals some of the better setups I've had over the years. I really, really, really like this rod. Let's talk about hook set for a second. So you're out there, whether you're dragging sideways or you've brought it all the way up, and you're say here, and you feel that telltale boom, 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 boom that we all have grown to know and love. Okay, I reel down on the slack, leave just a little bit of belly in it. I keep my rod tip at a little bit of an angle above parallel with the water, and slightly tighten it. And as soon as I feel it again, so this is straight. Keep it about like this. As soon as I feel that little boom boom again, I put just a slight belly going down to parallel with the water, and then I set with all my might. And what I've learned over the years is I set like I want to break my rod. Because when I give it a firm, but just kind of halfway hook set, just like that, even with these long rods with a lot of leverage, I tend to not keep the fish pinned unless they're very close, unless I get real soft tissue or they're very close to the shore. But if I reel down and just, with all my might, at least 9 times out of 10, that fish is hooked to stay. And it will drive through bone and cartilage, and that fish stays hooked. If it's a long cast, and I learned this from Larry Nixon from watching his videos, if it's a very long cast, I'm going to give it 8 or 10 quick reels, and I'm going to put a little more belly in the line, and I'm going to set it again. Because many times with a long cast, between the bow and your rod and the line stretch, you didn't get that barb in the fish's mouth. And you've got him pinned, but not for long. And I'm going to reel down, and I'm going to yank on it again. And that time, you know you've got him. In my opinion, if you're in a spot like a lake not too far from here, and you're catching a lot of 10, 12, 14-inch fish, especially the 10 to 12 inchers, and you set the hook on fish near the shore, and you're not occasionally slinging one up onto the bank, you're not setting the hook hard enough. And trust me, when you've got that 5-pounder, 8-pounder, 10-pounder on the end of your line, and he shakes his head at the boat or at the dock or at the shore, and that hook comes flying out of his mouth, you're going to wish you'd set just that much harder. If I'm going to fish, and I'm just going out to catch fish, this rig right here is my number one. The 7-foot medium heavy fast action with my Black Max and a Texas rig soft plastic. The fish around here, the fish are going to start biting in the next month or so, and I'm probably going to stick with this 4-inch finesse worm that I've got on here. As I get into late April, early May, I may change to my June bug U-tail or a crawl or baby brush hog. But this is what's going to get me started. And when I'm fishing year round, when I'm going just to catch fish, and I'm not even really familiar with the water, etc., or even if I am, if I'm just going to catch a few fish, unless I know that they're biting on something else, I'm throwing a Texas rig soft plastic, many times a straight tail worm, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that whatever water I'm fishing, if there's bass there, I can catch them on that, and I can get bit on that every time I go. And I may not catch huge creels that some guys catch with crankbaits and spinnerbaits. If I notice that they're cruising on shad and things like that, I'm going to change it up, and I'll throw a square bill, I'll throw a spinnerbait, I'll swim a jig, whatever it takes. But if I'm fishing, not knowing what the conditions are, not knowing what they're going to bite, I'm going to be throwing a Texas Rig Soft Plastic on this very setup because I know that I'm going to catch fish on it. If I was to fish a tournament, that's what I would start fishing with every time, unless for some reason pre-fish I started catching them on something else. 90% of the time, that's what I'm throwing. 90% of the fish I catch, that's what I catch them on. That's my confidence bait. That's my go-to bait. I reference Larry Nixon. That's something that he throws a lot of. Bill Dance, another guy that I really look up to as far as fishing, throws a rubber worm all the time. I've gone over colors before. Green pumpkin, you can never go wrong. June bug or some sort of dark purple, again, never go wrong. Watermelon, a good go-to color. Many like the black and blue. Not my personal favorite, but I know it produces. It's not a bad color. But if you can only have one bass rod in your arsenal, this 7-foot medium heavy with a good reel in the 6.5 range gear ratio with 12-pound fluoro or monofilament, or say 20 to 30-pound braid with a fluoro or mono leader, throw in a Texas Rig Soft Plastic is the way to go. You can always change out, throw a spinnerbait, a jig, a swim jig. I could throw lipless and crankbaits with this if I really wanted to. I've got more specialized rigs for that. But this 7-foot medium heavy is the one rod that I would never get rid of because I can do at least 90% of what needs doing with this rod. And if it's the only rod in the boat, I'm going to catch fish every time I go out. If the only lures I have on the boat are the makings for Texas Rig Soft Plastics, I'm going to catch fish every time I go out. So when you watch my video about what I've got in my tackle bag, you notice there's a lot of soft plastics. There's a lot of extra wide gap hooks, a lot of bullet weights, a lot of beads, a lot of swivels. I can throw Carolina rigs with this if I wanted to. Again, jigs, swim baits, plastic swim baits, swim jigs, spinner baits, frogs if I had some heavier line. Very, very versatile rig. But again, most of the time, it's going to be this Texas rig of some sort. And you're going to see me dragging the bottom, and it looks boring. But you see me out sometime, ask if I'm catching fish. And the answer, 95% of the time, is going to be yes, and I'm going to be catching them on a rig very similar to this. That swivel really keeps the worm from sliding all the way down. That is extremely important. It keeps it from wadding up against the hook. It gives you better hook sets. It also keeps it from getting all torn up at the head, at the nose. The bead gives a little bit of noise, a little bit of color. When I started going, it also protects the knot, but the swivel does that as well, the way I've got it rigged. But when I started putting that red bead on there, my strikes went up about 5 to 10%. And I really feel it's because of that red color. And predatory fish are programmed to see red as injured, wounded. It's the color of blood. And they really, really like that. The little bit of noise doesn't hurt, especially with the glass bead. The plastic bead makes some. The glass bead tend to get just a few more strikes. And that all helps. If you prefer tungsten weight, by all means, go ahead. Again, I'm a cheapskate. I stick with lead unless I'm on water that prohibits it. Then I'll use, more than likely, steel because tungsten is very expensive. I may go to brass, I may go to tungsten, whatever I have, whatever I need at the time. But for my standard rig, this is what you see. A lot of guys swear by Senkos and other types of stick baits, and they work very well. To me, a 4 or 6 inch straight worm, finesse worm, trick worm, etc., does the same thing, serves the same purpose. I can throw them the same ways: weightless, Texas rig, Carolina rig, wacky rig, etc. They tend to be a little less expensive. They tend to have as good or better action, in my opinion. These worms have tremendous action, as do the Zoom trick worms. And that's my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. That's what works for me. Your mileage may vary. Um, you know, I use that Bass Pro rod, that cheap Abu Garcia reel. I use either water gremlin or bullet weights. These beads came in an Eagle Claw pack. I believe the swivel's Eagle Claw. The hook, I guarantee you, is Eagle Claw, because with the exception of some of my finesse hooks, which are mustads, everything I use is Eagle Claw and has been since I was old enough to fish. Eagle Claw, laser sharp. They're inexpensive and they work. They come very sharp. They're strong. They hold up. I prefer a light wire hook for everything for better hook sets. If you're fishing heavier cover and fishing with heavier line, a heavier wire hook is the way to go. Most of the time, though, even in heavy cover, you're going to see me with a light wire hook. If I occasionally pull a fish off, so be it, but I tend to hook more fish and keep more fish pinned on the hook with a light wire hook. Makes an easier hook set. And the odd snag on the bottom, I can occasionally pull free with a light wire hook, where no matter what my line was, I would never be able to do that with a heavy wire hook. Maybe with 50-pound braid. I don't fish braid. I'm a cheapskate. This works for me. I even do what they call finesse flipping and pitching, where I use a rig similar to this. I may pin it in place. I may peg it with a bobber stop, a piece of rubber band. But I'll use a 4-inch or 6-inch worm, a 4-inch creature bait or craw, with a 3/16, 1/8 ounce weight, maybe up to a quarter, and pitch in that standard heavy cover with 12-pound line that most guys would throw a 1/2 ounce jig or a 12-inch worm with a 1/2 ounce weight, or a big long craw, or a big lizard. And I'll find my little pockets and I'll flip and pitch into small holes with this light tackle. If I get hung up in the weeds, I go out there and I get to fish. I paddle my kayak over there. I wade to it, whatever the case may be, or I wade it out and I slowly get it out. Now, don't get me wrong, I've occasionally broke off fish, but I tend to get more bites using that kind of a setup. And I will occasionally break off a fish. You have to be very, very careful with your line, and you may be retying every 10, 12 cast, every 30 cast, every 60 cast. You have to really run your finger. You start feeling frayed, you retie. In the last couple years, 3 or 4 times I've hooked really nice fish, and I had said right before my cast, after this cast, I'm going to retie my hook. Well, if you find yourself saying, after this cast I'm going to retie my hook, retie now, because I lost a 10 plus pound bass, would have been my personal best. Doing this, flipping into some logs, and I knew my line was frayed and I was going to go one more cast. I'd already caught a 5-pounder. I should have retied at that point, but I didn't, and I broke off a 10-pound plus fish. And I've broken off 2 more that I don't know how big they were, but they fought awful hard doing that same thing. So feel your line every couple of casts. You start feeling frays, cut off above the fray, retie. Bring in a spare spool with you, respool if you have to. But keep an eye on your line, especially when fishing heavy cover with light line. It'll pay big dividends. You'll get more hooks. You'll get more fish. You may lose an occasional fish, but if you're patient, you can get 95% of them out of that cover with this light tackle. You just may have to do some finagling. So this is Veteran Outdoorsman. Remember, Christ is King. Think to yourself, where am I going to spend eternity? If you got any questions about that, please let me know. Like, subscribe, leave a comment in the box. We'll catch you later.